Hi and welcome to Basic Folk. We have honest conversations with folk musicians. It is Cindy Howes. I am your host. Thanks for checking out the show today. Denison Witmer's music is kind and gentle. He's a skilled woodworker, an avid bird watcher, and until 2020, hadn't made a record for 7 years. Growing up in Lancaster, Denison was lucky enough to get some guitar lessons from Don Paris of the Innocence Mission, a well-loved indie folk band. This led to one of many lasting relationships in music as Don went on to produce some of Denison's early projects. He also counts Sufjan Stevens and Rosie Thomas among his friends and longtime collaborators, with Sufjan signing Denny to his label and saying something to the effect of, "I don't care if you never sell one album, releasing your music is a public service." Rosie Thomas, who is the only person, I guess besides me now, that calls him Denny, has experienced life and career in parallel, and he talks about what it's been like to have someone to grow up with like Rosie. Denison has a beautiful skill in that he is able to truly notice and see others. He gets into how this skill has made him a better person and a better songwriter. His latest album, American Foursquare, is written in tribute to his hometown Lancaster, PA, which he and his wife moved to in 2013 and where they have decided to raise their family. Denison talks about raising kids, calling it the most creative thing that I can do. He's also been working on songs for a side project called Uncle Denny, where he wrote a song for every day of January of 2019. That project has produced some beautiful songs and is available on Bandcamp, a must listen. I linked it on the website. You can check it out. All right, so we're going to take a listen to a song from Denison Witmer, from his latest album. So this is a song called Catalina Love, and then we'll get to our conversation with Denison Witmer on Basic Folk.
Choice. I'm living in the void. When I think about you lately, my head fills up with noise. You left here 2 months ago. I saw the hand of God swing low, and the garden I had planted was covered in the snow. How am I gonna let you know that I need your love? How am I gonna let you go, Catalina?
Cool. Well, thank you so much for talking to me today, Denison. Do people call you Denison?
Yeah, everyone except for my grandmother, who called me Denny. And my friend Rosie, who calls me Denny because she knows that my grandmother used to call me Denny. So
that's like very much like Rosie.
Yeah, totally.
Cool. Well, let's get to it.
Yeah.
So you grew up in and currently live in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. You moved back 7-ish years ago from Philly, which is like a lot of the focus on the new album American Foursquare. And I know that there were complicated feelings about moving back home, but how did you like growing up there, and how do you think Lancaster shaped you?
Well, I loved growing up here. I mean, I have no other place to compare it to in terms of my childhood, but I had a pretty idyllic, relaxed suburban lifestyle childhood. You know, I grew up in a town called Lidditz, Pennsylvania, which is a very quaint little downtown. And I'm one of 4 boys in my family, so I'm the third of 4. So I had 2 older brothers to keep me occupied, and then a little brother came along, and you know, my parents gardened in the backyard, and we played baseball, and we did, you know, normal suburban kid stuff.
Does one of your brothers?
Baseball.
Does one of your brothers own a tavern?
One of my brothers owns a coffee shop. Yeah, it's called the Green Line Cafe. It's in West Philadelphia. Yeah. Before
this interview, we were emailing about my friend Dietrich, and he's like, yeah, do they own a cafe? So...
Oh, interesting. Well, there is a place called the Witmer Tavern in Lancaster, Pennsylvania.
That's what I thought. Yeah.
Yes. So the Witmer Tavern, as long as I've known it, has been out of business. And then the building just sold and somebody's possibly reopening it. So maybe that's
Was that any relation?
About. I mean, I'm sure it is. There's Witmer, Pennsylvania, which is not too far up the road.
Okay.
So, I mean, I'm Swiss German Mennonite, right? So I grew up Mennonite, and that would be maybe the one part of my childhood, since we're talking about childhoods, that would be interesting to some people, is that I grew up Mennonite, which a lot of people think is Amish, but it's not. The Amish church actually broke off the Mennonite church before they came to the United States. So I definitely went to a Mennonite elementary school. I went to a Mennonite high school. And so that would be maybe one of the more formative things of my upbringing.
I was interested in thinking about the Mennonite community because you are very thoughtful, creative, sensitive, seems like emotionally open human being, emotional man.
Okay.
So how has the Mennonite community helped cultivate that side of you? That's just a guess that is where maybe that comes from. And if not them, what do you think encouraged that side of you?
It's hard to say. I mean, I don't think it was the church or the Mennonite upbringing, because a lot of Mennonites actually, although the Mennonite church itself is very thoughtful and open and forgiving and has an emphasis towards social justice and, is very engaged in the world in that way. I don't think there's much of a press to show your emotions. I mean, I remember my grandmother laughing when I was a kid. She would always cover her face and kind of keep her laugh to herself, she was a little bit more reserved. And my father was definitely more reserved as well. Mm-hmm. I don't know. It could just be that just the way my mom was super hands-on, and my brothers and I are all involved in the arts in some way, and we're all relatively emotionally available. I don't know why. My mother told my wife that I'm the closest thing to a daughter that she has. So I don't know what that means, but that's where we're at.
Yeah. Can you talk more about your mom and her parenting style?
Yeah, I mean, well, how much do you want to get into? I'm not sure if she'll listen to this, and I hope she doesn't. But I mean, she was great. I mean, she was very enabling. She taught us how to do everything. So I grew up doing my own laundry and vacuuming my room, and I sometimes joke that my mother, my parents had employees, not children, that's they kept us busy, but at the same time, I mean, they created 4 really able-bodied kids, and, we're all very DIY. If there's something I want to accomplish, I usually try to figure out how to do it. And so I've been very thankful for that. And I try to raise my kids, the same way, There's definitely a push and pull, where it's I also tell my friends, my mom's very particular as well. So it's I have never really successfully done laundry or chopped carrots in my mom's proximity. It's
mm-hmm.
I'll be my mom showed me how to do laundry every time I did laundry that I lived at home. You know what I mean?
Right,
so
right.
It's it's funny because at some point we just Mom, you've taught us this a million times. You can let go. We can do it.
Right.
And it's and the chopping carrots joke is kind of if my mom says, hey, yeah, can you chop those carrots? I'll say, sure. And I'll start to chop them the way she's already taught me. And then she'll be like, oh, I kind of wanted them a little bit more and I'm like, oh, I have to refine,
Mm.
So there's definitely a bar that I have to hit. But
right. Perfectionism
yeah, totally.
runs rampant.
Yeah, totally.
So before you were in music, you were working at your family's greenhouse, and you're now a woodworker. So we heard a little bit about some of like learning those trades, but what did the process of like learning those trades look like in practice?
Well, my family owned a greenhouse business. That's how I kind of defaulted into working at a greenhouse.
Was it like vegetables or flowers?
No, it was a wholesale. It was a wholesale, and then some of the time I was there, we had a retail space as well, and it was flowers and vegetable plants. But we didn't sell any produce. We were strictly where people would come in the spring and the fall to buy their plants,
like
for their
landscapers.
Gardens. Landscapers, yeah. Although we ended up, when it was just wholesale business, we would sell to other greenhouse companies who were open to the public. So we were just, it's funny, my wife is really into gardening now, and I don't recognize some of the plants because I only ever saw them as infant plants. I'd be spending 9 hours a day watering in like 110-degree greenhouse, and as soon as the plants got big enough to sell, they would be sold. So I never saw them as mature plants. And so it's funny to me now to be like, oh, I recognize the foliage of that plant, but I don't know why. And then I'm like, oh, that's what it looks like. And it's like, how many years later, 20 years later, I'm finally starting to learn more about the plants when they're
hilarious.
Yeah, when they're actually in a garden.
So where was music in your early life in terms of like who was playing you albums, who was playing instruments around you, and like what were you gravitating towards when you started to like develop your own taste?
Yeah, well, my oldest brother, Douglas, was he kind of set the bar for the rest of the brothers in terms of his creativity. He's kind of unparalleled in terms of like he's a musician, he's a painter, like he's just very creatively active. And he encouraged me to buy a guitar for my 16th birthday. And so that's what I did. And then, he was always in a band, he was always doing something like that. So then I tried to start writing my own songs, and it started as poetry, and then it kind of morphed into songwriting. And then I never really played cover songs, so I just kind of started writing songs the day that I got a guitar.
Yeah.
And from there, there's a local band here in Lancaster called the Innocence Mission, and they were like signed.
They're more than a local band.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yes, they're amazingly talented, and they're known all over the world. But at the time, I was just a 17-year-old kid who was taking guitar lessons from the guitar player of their band. His name is Don Paris. And I'm really thankful to him because he basically took me under his wing and said, I think you have an interesting way of playing guitar. Maybe guitar lessons isn't the best thing for you. Maybe we should record some songs instead. And so he recorded my first album and helped me, shape the songs into... kind of produced the songs and helped me learn arranging. And
that's cool.
Yeah.
So a couple questions about, I'm sorry if you can hear my dog barking. There's a fly in the house and he is upset.
That's all right.
It. He's been barking for the last hour. Okay. What did Don find interesting about your guitar playing?
I honestly don't know.
You don't know?
I don't know. He never said to me, like, this is what I find interesting about your guitar playing. But I think it was probably that I was kind of finding my own way through the instrument. And it could have also just been that as he taught me how to recognize different chord shapes and patterns, maybe he felt like he was removing some of of my exploration of the instrument. And maybe he thought it was just more interesting to let me kind of find what worked,
Yeah.
Because I definitely I just still don't even know what key I'm playing in. I still don't know what chords I'm playing. I mean, I recognize chord shapes and things now from being a musician for over 20 years, but I don't really let that guide the way I write.
I saw you comment on I think it was your early performance in general, but of your early guitar playing, you said, young Denison played guitar harder and with a pick. So how did it feel to start playing guitar, and how has your connection to the instrument changed over time?
Yeah. Well, I definitely started as a strummer. Um, I I didn't have enough control of my right hand to play fingerstyle probably until um, I was a few records in, to feel comfortable playing finger picking patterns and things like that. Um, and I don't know, it could have just been what I was listening to that influenced my style. I just kind of morphed into a fingerstyle guitar player, and that's what I feel most comfortable with now. Like I don't really enjoy strumming my guitar. It doesn't really bring me much. I don't feel emotionally connected to it when I'm strumming. I feel much better when I'm playing with my thumb, and
I wonder why
somehow
that is.
I don't know. Somehow the pick feels like a separation to me as well. Even though, I have a horrible habit of nail biting, and I think I'd have a better sound if I was playing with my nails, like if I grew my nails out and I could actually play. But every time I've tried one of those picks you put on your thumb to kind of replicate the sound of a fingernail, it never sounds right to me. So I just, and to be honest, I don't want to throw myself under the bus, but I am a little bit of a path of least resistance type of musician, where it's like, if it's working, I will take that path. And if it's not working, I don't really push myself too hard to try to do something that's not feeling good, So,
Just like the human body.
yeah, exactly. Exactly. Although, I used to be a very active runner. I used to run a lot on tour. It's what kept me sane. And since moving back to Lancaster, I have not been running quite the way I used to. And I don't, it's not for my lack of desire to push through the times when it doesn't feel good. It's just my schedule and my lifestyle. I haven't made time for it, to be honest.
Right.
It's nobody's fault but my own. Do you hear me just trying to come up with excuses, and I'm not going anywhere? So the reality is it's my own fault.
Well, maybe you could buy yourself a heart rate monitor, and then you'll have to run because you have a heart rate monitor.
That's true.
And then it'll be more like a video game than anything.
The thing is, it's like my wife has like a GPS running watch now that she uses, and she likes to track her miles and everything like that. And I usually just go, I'm going to go for a run for an hour, and I don't keep track of where I'm going. I don't have a particular path that I take when I go. I don't pace myself, I use it as a way to open up my mind. Like I feel like I get my best thinking done when I hit that runner's stride.
Yeah.
And I'm like in a place where my body's just functioning and my brain gets to just kind of open up.
That's cool.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask another question about Don. So, like you were saying, he produced some of your music and he played on some of your music and was kind of like encouraging when you were a young person, gave you a few guitar lessons. What was it like to have like a mentor like Don? I've been thinking a lot recently about mentors in general. So, like, what has your experience with mentors in general been like?
Well, I feel just really grateful. That's really my takeaway, is that I think Don and I made my first record when he was 31 and I was 20 or 19. Sorry, I was 19 and he was 31. And then I think about myself at 31. Now that I'm 44, I think about 31-year-old Denison, and I'm like, what if I recorded like a 20-year-old kid? Like, I don't know. Like, I want to believe that I would have, but it did make me kind of reapproach the way I relate to to younger musicians, and I always try to be available and encouraging, and there's a few different musicians that I've kind of tried to help guide along into a music career, and most times because people have done it for me,
Has your approach been more like creatively encouraging or like business professionally encouraging?
I think it just depends on it depends on the person, I mostly it's just been business, and knowing that now 20 years in, I've got lots of connections with people who can make things happen for musicians that they can't do on their own. So, and, usually what I'm drawn to about someone's music is not something I want to change. It's something that I find unique about them, and I want to amplify their voice in some way.
That's a good
so
point.
There's a musician that I started working with about 4 years ago. His name's Angelo D'Augustine. He's on Asthmatic Kitty
I love
now.
him so much.
Yeah, he's a great musician. And so he kind of came through a recording studio that I was part owner of in New York a few years back, and he just didn't really have an idea of how to make a career in music. And so I managed him for a while. And then when I had when my wife and I had our second kid, we were just not sleeping and not functioning. And I just said to him, Angelo, I love you so much. I can't in good faith manage you. I feel like I'm just going to fail you. And in some ways, getting out of the way of that was really good, because then he was able to meet a new manager, and I was able to introduce him to Sufjan and get him on the label. And it's been awesome to see his career.
Yeah, good call.
Yeah.
I didn't know it was you that was behind that young man.
Yeah, he's
from the
he's
beginning.
behind himself. I can only
Sure.
take credit in the sense that he was open enough to let me help him along.
That's so great.
Yeah.
So you mentioned you didn't learn to play other people's songs, so you immediately just started writing your own from the beginning. And I think you were 16 years old, kept a journal, wrote songs from those entries. So now, as someone who kind of stepped away from music for about 7 years, from what I understand, you've had to relearn, and you correct me if I'm wrong, relearn of a lot of what came second nature, when it came to playing and writing. So how do you relate to the writer that you first were while you were relearning? How do you think you're a different player, a different writer after rediscovering the musician in you?
Yeah, that's a great question. Hopefully it's not a cheesy metaphor, but I mean, I think all of life is kind of like tree rings, right? You kind of grow out, but I think you kind of circle back around over the same themes. At least I'm speaking for myself. That's the way I am. And I think there's an openness when I first started music, all I wanted to do was just write songs, and I didn't have any filter telling me this song is good or this song is bad or just whatever. It was just, I would just write and let it be what it is. And I think that's a very free place to create in. And then I think as your career progresses and you're given a budget and you have a certain amount of time, or there's a numbers game that kind of ends up entering. And for better or worse, it did enter my mind at some points in my career, and I kind of had to fight it back and go, okay, well, I don't want to think about those numbers. I just want to, create as selfishly as possible. And so that's something that I've really tried to focus on with every record I make, is to try to create something for myself and just be very pleased personally with what I'm making, and just hope that it translates. And sometimes it doesn't, sometimes it doesn't, but that's okay. It's not going to change the fact that I'm going to make more music. I think more recently with the 7-year break, if I can speak about my new record, it's that I actively tried to sever the need for music to pay me. As the digital music, industry kind of grew, it was really unclear to me where my finances were going to come from with music. Aside from film and TV placements, which is kind of like playing the lottery. Sometimes you get one, sometimes you don't,
Right.
I couldn't see myself raising my family on the income that I was making without being away all the time. And that just wasn't an option for me. I didn't want to be touring all the time. So I started a carpentry business to try to just say, okay, well, this is where I make money. And if music makes money, I'll put that money back into making more music. And if it makes extra, then I'll do something fun with that. And if not, I just won't sweat it. And being a carpenter for, several years, my brain was just really locked into that type of creativity, which is like an analytical creativity. Carpentry for me is not emotional. I'm not a wood sculptor. I'm not out there trying to make something that is new and original when it comes to woodworking. Like, I do historical millwork, and I build things that I prefer designers to give me a design, and I like to build their design,
Rosie Thomas has been your friend and collaborator for over 20 years, and you wrote a song for her on your latest album, Roseanne. Lovely song. How has her creativity and performance made you a better musician? And also, what has it been like to have someone like Rosie to grow alongside in your life and career?
Oh, wow. Well, so Rosie and I toured together from really, really early on. We just ended up kind of having an emotional connection, and we struck up our friendship and just made a lot of music together. And she's taught me to be true to myself. She's definitely taught me to follow my instincts musically. And the ways that she's done that are not just being an encouraging friend and kind of saying I really love this song, but maybe we arrange it a little bit like this, or work on it this way, or this verse doesn't make any sense, or something like that. I mean, just talking about our creativity. But then also, she had me arrange some songs for her, and I had never done that before. So when she made her album, These Friends of Mine, I worked on that and recorded a bunch of the songs, and had to explore harmonies and just look at them externally. It's not something that I actually wrote. I can just think about this as just an arrangement. And that making that record taught me a lot about arranging my own music, about how to step back from it and go, okay, because when I'm playing guitar and singing, I'm thinking about what I'm singing. I'm such a lyrics person. I get so wrapped up in lyrics. If I listen to music and the lyrics don't connect with me, I lose interest. That's just the way I am. So when when I'm arranging my own music, I really have to kind of separate myself from it and go, okay, just on a musical level, what's happening here, and what can help boost the song and help push it along and make it more interesting. And I feel like Rosie really helped me see that.
We used to play her song Wedding Day on my college radio show. It was a folk show in Boston, and it was a bigger station than a smaller college station. And it was one of the most requested songs.
Oh, really?
In our entire show, for all 4 years I was there. Another thing about Rosie is that you did this, well, it's not really about Rosie, but she brought it up. You did this really beautiful. So first of all, your social media is awesome.
Oh, thank you.
I love what you write, and I love your tone and everything. You did this beautiful post on Mother's Day for your wife, Jenny. And Rosie commented, "I love your family, and I love how you truly see your wife. You've always had a knack at noticing others. It's why you're one of my favorite friends and why you write the beautiful songs you do." So, oh my God, if anyone ever wrote that about me, I'd be shut everything down.
That's why I'm hiding behind the pop filter so that I can wipe the tear out of my eye so you don't see it.
So, anyways, it's a little dusty in here, but such a beautiful sentiment from a lovely friend, obviously. Where do you think that ability to see others comes from, and how has it made you a better partner, parent, friend, and if at all, a better musician?
Oh man, you're really landing some good questions here.
A lot of home runs in this one, Denison.
So many. Well, I don't know. I mean, I am a pretty observant person. I'm a people person by nature, and I'm also a helper. I don't really follow any of the Enneagram things, and I don't do a lot of personality tests. But I do know that I am a helper. When I see somebody in need, or if I see a connection that can be made, or two people who I really think need to know each other, I will go out of my way to introduce those people. And I have the benefit of having traveled all over the world and having met a lot of people, and I don't know why, but people connect very easily to me emotionally. Like a lot of people connect. I'm the guy that everyone hugs, right? Like I meet somebody and I hang out with them for like a half an hour and they always go in for the hug when we leave. And I don't know. I don't know why, baby. It's just, but I like how people work. I like to talk to people about what's on their mind and just figure out what they're going through and what's going on. So maybe it's that. I don't know. I think I have to work. I have to consciously remember to kind of like slow down and ask questions. That's something that I taught myself years ago, was just to try to ask questions. And it's interesting. You learn so much. I think when I was 19, I followed a girlfriend to Japan. I dated my high school girlfriend was a Japanese exchange student, and I followed her to Japan. And I lived there for about 6 months. And it was my first time outside of the United States. I had no idea what I was getting into, right? Like,
yeah.
And I think that trip taught me a lot about empathy and understanding that, people are pretty similar in nature to, desires, like human needs, and that the world is a very big place, and places operate, differently, subtly differently. But, the way I was raised is just one way of being raised. And so that was the beginning of wanting to travel, and then being able to travel with music kind of helped me hopefully widen that empathy, just in the sense that I've been in a lot of situations where maybe it would be uncomfortable, but if you're open to it and interested in different cultures and things, you kind of you learn so much, That's a long-winded answer.
That's okay. I have a million questions. I do have a question about...
My stomach keeps growling. Do you hear it?
No, I don't hear it.
I wonder if the microphone that I skipped lunch today by accident, and I ate I pounded like a half a pint of blueberries before I came down here and turned the microphone on, and my stomach's just like, I love blueberries. I'm gonna work on them. So.
Yeah, I'm trying to figure out where to go because I have a question that kind of relates to that, but not really. So, okay, never mind. We'll get to that one later. Okay, just from a narrative perspective, in terms of like stepping away from music, it seems like you and your wife decided to move back to Lancaster to be close to your parents when your dad was sick. Does that line up?
No, it wasn't quite like that. My dad passed away before I moved back to Lancaster. My dad was sick around the time I was making my album Carry the Weight, which was like 2008 is when I made that record, and he passed away in between. We passed away in 2012, so we were still living in Philadelphia at that time. No, we moved back to Lancaster somewhat because, our son, our oldest son was, I'm trying to think how, we weren't in total agreement about actually moving back to Lancaster. If I'm being honest, I wasn't ready to move because I really enjoyed living in the city and I loved the house that we had. I worked really hard on making it the home that I wanted to live in, and I'm a city person through and through. Mm-hmm. I like the energy of being in a city, and but I was on tour quite a bit, and that was fine when we didn't have kids. But as our son was getting older, there was a really brutal winter where my wife was just like stuck in the house. I think I was in Europe for like 5 weeks. And she couldn't go anywhere, and she was feeling really frustrated and really cooped up. And So we talked about it and we said, okay, well, let's move somewhere, but where do we want to go? And Lancaster seemed like the best fit because I have a lot of connections here, having grown up here, and its proximity to Philadelphia is good because I can take the train to the city in an hour.
Where's your wife from?
She's from Charlottesville, Virginia. Yeah. So
Further away.
Further away. And we didn't want to go to Charlottesville just because it wasn't the right fit for our family, and she didn't want to go back to her hometown. So, yeah, we ended up choosing Lancaster, and I was actually about to make a Christmas album. I had already scheduled the studio time, set everything up to make a Christmas album, and then we had decided to move, and I had to put that on hold, and then one thing led to another, and then I ended up not making music for a while. And, we worked through all that. The good thing is that we were able to talk about it and kind of move. I was able to move through some of my resentments, which I definitely had, and struggled with. But I have to say, retrospectively, I'm very thankful to be here. It is the right place for us at this time in our lives. And I'm thankful that we made the move. And I mean that not in like a, acceptance is the final stage of grief kind of way. I mean it in like, I found an acceptance in this decision, and I found a peace in this decision, because I'm experiencing a lot of joy being here. And creatively, I didn't know how much I needed to go inward and not outward. And in the city, I was just looking at what's around me, and I was kind of pulling from like all of this, stimulation of city life and friends, and maybe it was also a phase of life too. But that was the source of my creativity. And then when we got here, I was like, oh man, I'm so busy with just every day. Most of my time is spoken for with my family. And when I had creative time, there was nowhere to go for external stimulation. It was like that long, hard look in the mirror, and I'm like, well, what am I going to write about?
No one wants that.
Create, yeah. Nobody really wants it, but it's actually kind of cathartic. And if you're willing to go there, you learn a lot about yourself. I mean, I did a tour when I was, I don't know, I must have been like 24. I had this old van that I bought off my parents, and I outfitted it to have like a bed in the back and store all my stuff in it. And I embarked on this like self-booked tour for like 2 or 3 months all over the United States. And the radio broke on the second day, and I was too cheap to replace it. And I did 25,000 miles in that van with no radio. Some of my drive days were like 8 hours long. Yikes. And I, at the time, was like, I'm never going to be able to handle this, But retrospectively, I think that tour somehow fixed something in my brain, like in the silence that it required, like the deep thought and just being in my head. I mean, don't get me wrong. Sometimes that can be a pretty dark place, and there's like no checks and balances, and you can really go off the rails, right? But it was really good for me. And as I was writing this new record, and as I was trying to start to explore my musical creativity again here in this house, I actually thought about that time, and I was like, I got some of my most like some of my strongest mental breakthroughs, like personally, happened when I had nothing to go on other than just my own thoughts, And so I tried to focus on that. And yeah, I think silence is important, and I think I've learned that again this last year, as we were all pushed into, quarantine. And don't get me wrong, I welcome a lot of distractions. Like I love, there's a lot of TV shows I love. There's a lot of podcasts I listen to. I do all of that. But I did at some point this year have to make a conscious decision to not engage with screens and really check out. And with my kids, I definitely, they don't have phones, they're 9 and they're 5, they have regulated screen time, And I don't have regulated screen time because I'm regulating my screen time. So, my wife and I talked about it, and we said, well, if we're going to regulate our kids' screen time, then we should regulate our own as well. And so we've consciously tried to get away from our devices as much as we can to try to just think. And I see my kids' creativity, and like they draw all these awesome pictures, and they have like all this imaginary play and all this fun stuff going on. And I think, I want that. I want to do that. Obviously, I have all these responsibilities too. Like there's just so much about my life is different than my kids in terms of like that I have to make money and I have to make meals and I have to wake up. It's like, but at the same time, no one's telling me I have to sit and scroll Instagram. That's like a thing. I don't have to do it.
Yeah.
I like it for catching up with my friends. I like seeing what's going on. But at the same time, I think I dosed a little too heavy on some of the screen last year. That's why.
There's just a point in scrolling for me recently where I was like, I don't even know any of the people or like care about any of the things that I'm seeing right now. I'm just like digging.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And the thing is, we're not going to find it in Instagram.
No.
Find it in silence.
Yeah, or with each other, and that's the one thing that I think has been a good reminder with quarantine too, is that people are seeking community or desire to be in nature again. And for a musician, it's slightly terrifying because I'm like, well, how are people going to find out about my music if I don't put it out there or advertise about it or anything? But, personally, it's actually very exciting because it's like, I don't have to worry about that anymore. I can just do whatever I want and not have to worry about the algorithms, It eats me alive some days. I mean, and the label manager at Asthmatic Kitty will as much tell you that early on with the record, I was really trying to figure out how the music business changed, because I was just used to releasing CDs and vinyl. And I mean, when I started, I was releasing tapes. And everybody's migrating over to Spotify, and I definitely got into a place with my mind where I was like, okay, so if Spotify is the answer to getting your music heard and you have to get on playlists and you have to do all this stuff, it's like, how do you even accomplish all this? It just seemed like this mountain that was like impossible to climb, and then you're like, if Spotify favors your music and then it becomes like part of the algorithm, then more people discover it. But if it doesn't, then the algorithm works against you. And that thing really messed my head up for like a good couple months. I was in like how do I share my music with people? Like other than just my reach without reminding people over and over again, because I don't want to do that either. It's a very weird time to
So let's
music.
talk about something that's like exactly the opposite of that.
Yeah, sounds good.
Uncle Denny.
Oh yeah.
Experimental self-relief project where you wrote and recorded a song into a single mic every day for the month of January, and then you put it on Bandcamp without overthinking it.
Yeah.
So it sounds like there was a lot of like free association writing with this project. Sounds like everything about this project was free association. How has that changed you, like the way that you approach any project or any problem in your life?
Well, that was a great exercise in songwriting for me, the Uncle Denny project. And that was an accidental project. I sat down on January 1st, because I had this microphone kind of set up similar to the way it is right now in our conversation. And I just said to myself, oh, I'm just going to write a song about the new year. So then I wrote a song. And then the next day I came back downstairs and I was like, I'm just going to try to write another song, and really not overthink it, especially on the heels of making a record where I thought through every note that's played on that record, and I worked on it for so long. I labored over American Foursquare for several years, and I'm thankful that I did. Actually, it's, I'll digress for a second and say, I listened to American Foursquare today in preparation for this interview because I never listen to my own records, but I decided I should just listen to it again so that I could speak, you know, a little bit more accurately about it, or at least, you know, connect with the songs again in a way that I felt like I could talk about it. And I'm really proud of that work. I'm really, really proud of it. I feel like in terms of a career, every once in a while as an artist, you get to materialize what you hear in your head entirely. It doesn't always happen, but I feel like with American Foursquare, I got there like closer by percentages than maybe any other record I've ever made. And so I'm really, really happy with it. But that said, you know, it was so much work. And Uncle Denny became this kind of just, like you said, free association, like a little bit different part of my personality that maybe people don't know as well, you know, where I'm just writing about whatever's on my mind and telling stories about things that happened to me on tour, or just writing about current events, and putting it out before I could overthink it, before I could think like, is this a good song or is this song bad? Or, you know, I didn't want to think about any of that. I just wanted it to be an exercise in songwriting. And in some ways I wanted other musicians to hear it and maybe say to themselves, like, I don't have to be so precious about this stuff all the time. And there's a time and a place for it, but maybe it's just good to create, you know, just be creative, you know, with no agenda. And so, yeah, it started as no agenda, but trust me, around January 15, where I was like, okay, I've got a song a day, you know, I'm going to keep going with this. You know, I was pretty loose with myself in the sense that I gave myself days off. I wasn't like, it has to be a song a day, has to, you know. Sometimes, like, both of my kids have birthdays in January. Like, I wasn't writing songs those days, and, you know, there were other things that were going on.
What year was it? It wasn't this January.
No, it was January 2020. Yeah.
January 2021, it was like every week something crazy was happening.
Oh,
so
totally.
that you didn't have to deal with the insurrection or anything.
No,
but
I didn't
there
have
was
to
still
write
lots
about the
going on.
insurrection. Yeah. And
Jeez.
you know, when January 2021 rolled around, I set my microphone up late December, and I was like, am I going to make another Uncle Denny record, you know? And I came down here and nothing came to me, and I thought, well, no, now's not the right time. I do feel it again, though. Over the last few months, I've felt another Uncle Denny record coming on. I don't know if it'll happen and to what capacity it will be. You know, if it'll be a song a day type of thing, or if it will be some other type of instantaneous, you know, release. But that's one of the beautiful things about digital music too, is that you can release things really quickly, you know, and I guess, you know, it's also the scary thing about music too, is that, you know, things, like you said, you know, you're scrolling and you don't even know why you're scrolling. When you're part of the attention economy, which I don't really love being part of the attention economy, the scary part of it is like, well, laboring over a record for 5 years and hoping anybody hears it is really scary right now. But then doing a record in a month and putting it out, it's like, well, maybe somebody will hear it, maybe they won't. Like, it's way less stressful.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, parenthood. On the Resistance podcast, you had a couple of really interesting things to say about being a parent and talking about that, like, you've had those moments where you've been really frustrated and sadly resentful of being a parent. But on the flip side of that, I think it's really cool what you're saying about, you say, I really believe that children are the most creative thing I can do. And what I mean by that, it's a collaboration like no other collaboration I've been a part of. And by that, here's what I think you mean, and you can tell me if I'm right or wrong. It means that you have to be creative in the way that you react and think about how they're reacting to you, like how they're showing you themselves. How have you been able to like channel such deep thinking as a parent and like push aside the resentment and cultivate like patience and awe with your kids?
Wow. I mean, it's it just depends what day you catch me, you know. A few months ago, I was really in a spell for a couple of weeks where I just could not get a free moment to just get a thought out, you know. And my wife and I have been trying to give each other personal time, as much personal time as we can, when we can. But at the same time, we really love doing things together as a family. So sometimes we'll opt out of our own personal time for family time, you know. So it's balance. It's definitely balance. In terms of parenting, I still stand by that statement that it is the most creative thing I've ever done. And that's because, you know, when I'm writing a song, ultimately I'm shaping it, you know, from start to finish. Or I think a painter would say the same thing. You know, you're painting something, you control the brush, you know where things are going to land. And if you don't like it, you erase it and you start over, you know. But with kids, you know, there's free will. There's this personality attached to it that says, like, I don't want to do that. I want to do this other thing. And then you have to kind of go into your own moral code and say, okay, well, this other interest that my kid is expressing, like, does it rub against my moral code? You know, it might not be exactly what I want to do, but if it's something they love to do, then I'm going to encourage it, you know, if it's not negatively impacting their life.
Like, did that come from like a book you read, or like your experiences like being a kid that you remember?
No, it didn't. I don't know where it came from. That's a good question. I don't know where it came from. Maybe just a conversation I had with my wife where we were like, what kind of parents do we want to be? You know, and I have to say my parents were really cool when it came to, you know, I didn't go to college. My parents didn't pressure me to go to college. You know, they knew I wanted to make music, and in my senior year of high school, I made a tape, you know, that maybe 10 people on the planet have ever heard, you know, but it was like part of my school project, and they helped me manufacture it, you know, and they really pushed me in the directions that I wanted to go, you know. And so maybe it was that knowing that I had been encouraged myself to just explore what my interests were, was what helps me do that with my own children. I don't know. But the rewards are just, I mean, it's so incredible to watch a child go like really deep into their interests, you know, and to foster that, to be like, oh, you want to go there with this, like, my oldest son is just obsessed with maps, you know, obsessed, like, loves geography. And so we just keep buying atlases, and what atlas do you want next? Let's get it. Like, and I have learned so much about world geography and, you know, understanding population growth and differentials in you know, farming and different. I have learned so much from his interest, and it's been so fun for me. It's like delegating a part of my mind. I don't know how else to say it. You know, it's really incredible. So, yeah.
That's cool. Yeah. All right, we got one more thing that we have to do.
Okay.
Before we wrap it up.
Sure, let's go for it.
It's called the lightning round.
Ooh, lightning round. I'm not very good at these. We'll see.
No one is.
Okay, that's good to know. I feel like I'm not competing against anything.
Yeah. Okay, here we go. First album you bought with your own money?
Benny Hester, When God Ran, on cassette. I was deep into Christian music when I was a kid because that's what my parents let us buy. So I used to mow the lawn and listen to Benny Hester.
That's cute.
Yeah.
What was the last book you read?
The last book that I read was, well, I'm currently rereading A Prayer for Owen Meany, which holds up really well. I was not sure because I read it in high school, but I didn't remember it very well, and it's great. My favorite book, though, of the last couple of years was The Goldfinch by Donna Tartt.
Okay.
That was incredible. And H is for Hawk. That was a great one, too.
Ooh. for a bird watcher.
Yeah, a falconer, yeah.
All right, a couple more. Flying or invisibility?
Oh, flying.
This is the last one,
Okay.
Denison.
Okay.
Where is the most beautiful place you've ever visited?
Oh, okay. Sweden in August is pretty magical.
Really?
Yeah, I played a festival in Sweden in August, and I was staying at this farmhouse, like about a mile up the road from where the festival site was, and I walked back and forth every day, and those walks were just very indelible, like sweet light, late in the evening, but far enough north where it's still light out, the sun's just basically hovering right above the trees, and the fields were golden. I mean, that's very indelible. Now, I will say there are parts of Lancaster, Pennsylvania that look like that. Like, we are very lucky here when it comes to beautiful farmland. So there, or, I have memories of being at some Buddhist temples in Kyoto in Japan when I was there, which I can just conjure up those images very easily. Just the aesthetic and just everything about it, the implementation of sand and water and flowers and just the color of the buildings, the architecture.
Wow.
I gave you 2 answers, sorry.
Those are good. I mean,
you know what, but can I give you one more? There's one more.
Yeah.
My favorite place in the United States is the Redwood Forests, and I have to go there every few years. It's like a water level for me. I have to check
Muir Woods?
Muir Woods is gorgeous, yeah. But the
Redwood
whole
is
avenue
different?
of the Giants, the whole way down, just north of San Francisco, there's just so many great. And the Oregon coast too. I mean, so in November 2019, when I was finishing American Foursquare, my wife and my kids flew out to Seattle to meet me at the end of the recording session. We rented a car and we drove to San Francisco, and we drove the coast. We just drove the whole way down the Oregon coast, and there's parts of the Oregon coast that are just all sand dunes. That's just it's pretty, but it's mostly sand dunes. And I was telling Jenny, like, you don't understand. Like, the Oregon coast is beautiful. Like, you get farther south in Oregon, it becomes rocky. It's like no other place, that we get to have out here on the East Coast. Maybe Maine is similar, but we ended up kind of like chasing a sunset and turning a corner on the coastal highway, and there was just like all these rocks out in the ocean.
Oh, wow.
And a sunset, and she just starts crying, because it's so beautiful. It's just so beautiful. We pulled over and we were like, the kids were just kind of indifferent, so we were like, look guys, you can just play on your iPads for a minute. We are going to sit here and just take it in. And so if you haven't been to the coast of Oregon, it's a must. It's a must.
Okay.
Yeah.
I've been to 3 of those 4 places, or one of those 4 places, so I have some traveling to do.
You do. Do it.
Yeah.
Send me
All right.
pictures.
I'll do it. Yeah, totally. Denison, thank you so much. It was so awesome to
thank
talk
you.
to you.
It was great to talk to you too.
Basic Folk this week was produced by Laura McCarthy. Alex Stanton of Townspeople composes our music. Basic Folk is on the American Songwriter Podcast Network. I'm your host, Cindy Howes, and you can listen wherever you get podcasts or at our website, basicfolk.com. All right, we'll talk to you next time. Bye.